Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 1 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn how to make your Raspberry Pi sing and dance. Now, why a class on the Raspberry Pi, you ask? Well, let me answer. Over the last couple of years, the number one request that I've gotten from viewers and subscribers is to do a class on the Raspberry Pi. So you asked and I listened. Number 2, as I look at the available educational resources out there, what I find is most of the material is really project-based. What I didn't find is a really good methodical and systematic set of lessons that teach you how to use the Raspberry Pi. Now, this is the situation. If you go out and see someone do something really cool on the Raspberry Pi and you sort of copy their code and hook up their circuit and get your Raspberry Pi to do that same thing, you really haven't learned anything. That's not going to happen on this channel. Not on my watch. No, you are going to learn the Raspberry Pi so you can have your own ideas and you can pursue your own projects and your own inventions and your own creativity, and you'll have the skills to implement those ideas on your Raspberry Pi. Okay, so that's the second reason. The third reason is, as I look at the available material out there, what I see is it seems like most of the things being done on the Raspberry Pi are things like retro gaming. That is going in and trying to get your old favorite arcade games running on the Raspberry Pi. Or it has to do with like media streaming, things where you might be having a media server in your home for videos or audio or things like that. It seems like a lot of the work is around those two things. Where my real heart is in circuits and sensors and actuators and getting in and digging down and working with those GPIO pins like we did on the Arduino. And that's really what I want to do here, because that is where I think the real magic happens. Okay, so that is why we are doing these series of lessons. And this class will really be about building your coding skills, building your math skills, building your engineering skills, and also having a lot of fun. So I really want to make this class fun. I hope you guys have had fun in my other classes, but we're going to be doing little projects along the way, and those projects are going to be building your skills. So what I am going to need you to do now is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. And Sunfounder is actually going to be sponsoring this series of lessons, and we will be using their most excellent Sunfounder Ultimate Raspberry Pi Kit. Now, why did I do this? Because I very much wanted this series of lessons to be around circuits and components and sensors, and so I wanted to find a good kit that represented a large number of components so we can get a lot of learning done, high quality components so that we're not frustrated with things that don't work. And at the same time, I wanted something that was affordable, and I sort of zeroed in on this kit, kind of got hooked up with the guys over there, and they agreed to sponsor this series of videos. And so I'm doing it because I think this is the best kit, and then I've really enjoyed my interactions with the guys over at Sunfounder. But enough of this shameful advertising. Let's jump in and let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. What my goal for today in today's class is get us to the point that we have first boot on the Raspberry Pi, and then I want to go in and I want to help you get your desktop configured. There's some things that I love about the Raspberry Pi, and there's some things I don't like that much. And one is, I think that when you boot it, it comes up in a really lame kind of low contrast, hard to use desktop environment. And I'm going to kind of show you what I do to crisp that up to make things more readable, and particularly when I'm teaching, something that will be easier for you to see what I'm doing. And then also you'll get kind of familiar with how to customize the desktop for your particular taste or your particular applications. It's not quite as straightforward as using a Windows machine, and there's a little bit more of sometimes kind of a hodgepodge feel to the way things work. But I'll take you through in today's lesson, and I'll get you comfortable with configuring your desktop. Now, what I'll also say is what are the upcoming lessons. So today we're going to go to first boot. We're going to get our desktop configured. Next week, what the lesson will be is I'm going to give you a quick one lesson overview of Linux. You will not become a Linux expert, but you will learn enough to make your way around the Linux terminal. Because really, as we get into really using the Raspberry Pi, we got to get away from those windows and folders and kind of like little baby computer skills, and we've got to know how to do what we need to do on the terminal. And man, working on the Linux terminal is a lot of fun, and you're going to learn how to find your way around Linux on that terminal. Then in the third lesson, lesson number 3, I'm going to give you an overview of Python. Now, I know a lot of you guys have taken my Python class, my AI class, you've taken my Python with Arduino class, and so you're probably familiar, but just understand we got other people that are coming in fresh. We don't want to leave them behind. In this channel, we don't leave any man or woman behind. Okay, so we're going to kind of give enough Python where people will be able to take this. You guys that are experts, tune in. Maybe you could be a resource to help people who are brand new. Maybe you could check the comments and see if there's questions. You could jump in and be a help. Okay, so that's the first 3 lessons. Then on the 4th lesson is when we will come in and actually start working with the GPIO pin. So in lesson 4 is when you need to be ready to start building the circuit. So I've got a link down in the description. It would be great if you guys went ahead and started putting your hardware together. And so it would be a great time to go ahead and order the kit so that when we get to lesson number 4, we all have our gear put together. Okay, speaking of gear, besides the kit, you're going to need a Raspberry Pi. I hope most of you already have a Raspberry Pi. The best thing would be if you have a Raspberry Pi 4. You don't need a Raspberry Pi 4 with a lot of memory, just sort of like a standard Raspberry Pi 4 would be great. Most of the stuff that we're doing in these lessons should work on a Raspberry Pi 3, but a Raspberry Pi 3 or a Raspberry Pi 4 would work. Okay, I will say that it's a little hard right now to find a Raspberry Pi, and they're a little bit expensive right now. So you might think about like looking on eBay, or you might think about looking around, seeing if you could buy a used one, find a deal on one somewhere. But what I've done in the description down below, I put a link to kind of like the best starter package that I could find if you don't have a Raspberry Pi. And there's a couple of things, or you can just kind of find a used one and try to put it together yourself. But there's a couple of things. Is on the 4, this is a USB Type-C connector. Okay, and so you need a power supply to power up your Raspberry Pi. And then also make note that the Raspberry Pi 4 has one of those little tiny HDMI connectors. And so you've got to have something that will take you from the small HDMI cable to the standard HDMI cable. And the kit that I linked to does do that below. But like I say, by whatever means you can, just find the best deal that you can on getting a Raspberry Pi. Then you're also going to need a SD card. I think that this is where you want to buy a good SD card, like get a Samsung or a SanDisk or something like that. Get a known brand. And 32 gigabytes is a good size. 32 gigabytes would be enough to do pretty much anything that you would want to do. You don't need a crazy big one, because if you get a crazy big one, you're kind of wasting your money, I think, because you really don't need anything much bigger than a 32, maybe a 64. Okay. All right, so that is the gear that you're going to need. And I think I've spent enough time on all this introductory banter, and I think it is time that we actually jump in and see if we can get some work done. So I am going to need to come over here if I can. Can't find my mouse. I'm going to need to come over here. Guys, you can see why I'm a little bit confused here. This is my studio. Let me get out of your way. And you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 monitors. And so sometimes it is a little bit hard to see where I'm going and what I'm doing. Now you can see the 1, 2, 3, and then over here is the 4. This one's black because that's the one that I'm going to be working on my Raspberry Pi with. And then also this will be the Raspberry Pi screen that you will see as I'm typing. And then I'll have a second screen up here that just I can see that maybe I can put notes on or whatever. But you can see it's pretty easy for me to lose my mouse if I am not careful. But there we have it. And so now what I am going to need you to do is I'm going to need you to call up a browser. And let's see, this is the kit that I'm using here, Sunfounder Raspberry Pi Ultimate Starter Kit, link down in the description. Make sure you guys go ahead and order that. And now I need you to come over here and I need you to go to Raspberry Pi. I need you to search on download Raspberry Pi installer. The first result here is Raspberry Pi downloads software for the Raspberry Pi. Looks like a good place for us to go, so I will click on that. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead. I can make that full screen on this one. And so let's hope that I have an internet connection here. There it is. Boom. And then I am on Windows. And so what I need to download is Raspberry Pi Imager for Windows. You can also get it for the Mac OS or for the most excellent Ubuntu, but I am working on the Raspberry Pi Imager for Windows. This is not the image itself, it's not the operating system itself, but it is the software that will allow you to download and burn the operating system onto your SD card. So let's go ahead and get that. I am getting the one for Windows. And then let's see here. I think I do have to pull this up a little bit. Let's see if I can get you where you can see this. And it is downloading. Okay. There you can see it's the happy little icon down here, shows that it's downloading. I've got about 30 seconds left, and so I'm not going to pause the video. We can just sit and chat and sip coffee while we're waiting on this thing to download. It should just take a minute or two. I've got a little bit of a slow internet connection today. Usually it's pretty good in the morning, but right now it's not real good. But it is almost done. Okay, it looks like it is done. And now I'm going to just come here and just right here in the window, I'm going to click on it. And with a little luck, it should launch the installer. And the installer is launched. Let me get it over here where you guys can see it. And what do we want to do? We want to install. And then it says completing Raspberry Pi Imager setup. That's good. Run Raspberry Pi Imager. Good. And so I will say finish. And boom, there it is. Okay, I downloaded this before, so it might take you guys a few more seconds. So don't panic if yours is doing more things than mine is. Maybe it's because I had installed this before that mine went so fast. Okay. First thing that we are going to need to do is choose our operating system. Now, what I'm going to need you to do is come down and say Raspberry Pi OS Other, because I want the Raspberry Pi OS Full. Do you see that? Raspberry Pi OS Full. That installs some other software that is really kind of neat and kind of helpful. And so it sort of gives you the full-featured operating system. And some of those things are kind of neat. And with a 32 or 64 gigabyte card, we have more storage than what we really need. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. Now it says choose the SD card. Well, here's my SD card. And then what I need to do is I need to put it into one of these little adapters here, because I don't have a small SD card port right on my computer. So I got to use the little adapter that allows me to plug it into a USB port. And now I need to reach down here and try to kind of blindly see if I can plug it in. Okay, so with that, now I will come over here and I will say choose the SD card. Choose wisely. Make sure you don't like choose your C drive or something like that and erase everything. But let's see, it doesn't. Let me try that again. There it is. Okay. Had to plug it in twice. Sometimes the USB ports seem to get a little confused, but let's come here now. Let's choose that. And now what we're ready to do is we are ready to write it. Okay, so I'm going to say write. Are you sure? Yes. Do double check. Don't just click yes. Make sure you're on the right one because this will erase everything. Now it says waiting 0%. Guys, depending on your internet connection and the speed of your computer and the speed of the USB port, this might take from 15-30 minutes up to an hour or so. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you to go ahead and pause. I'm going to tell you to go ahead and pause the video. All right. And when yours is downloaded and ready, then come back, because I don't want to sit here and just shoot the breeze with you for an hour. So let's go ahead and pause and then come back when your card is written. Okay, your card should be written now, and I have my card right here. I have my card right here ready to go. And so what we're going to do is we are going to come over here to this alternate view. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to get this thing booted up. Okay, mine is done, and I will take the SD card, and we are ready to try to boot this up. Okay, so we're going to come, and the first thing is that when you slide your SD card into the Raspberry Pi, I like to have absolutely nothing plugged into the Pi. Like, certainly you don't want to have the power cord plugged in, because if you do, likely you're going to corrupt the card when you put the card in. So I have everything disconnected. I like to have the HDMI disconnected as well, because sometimes I think that you're getting some voltage back on the Pi from the HDMI. I want this thing completely unpowered when I slide this in. Now, the HDMI slot itself is over on this side. Let me bring this down where you can see it a little better. It's on this side and it's on the underside. And so you need to get your SDI card. You need to turn it with the pin side up. Do you see the gold pins? Those need to be up. Then you need to lift your Pi and you need to find that slot, and then you slide it into the slot. Now, when you slide it into the slot, you don't get a spring-loaded effect. It just slides in and slides out. So don't expect any type of click or anything like that. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and plug the HDMI cable in. And I believe that this is the HDMI 1, so that's what I'm going to be going to. And then I'm going to come over here, and the moment of truth, we are going to bring power to this thing. And okay, first good news is we're seeing some signs of life here with some happy little blinking lights. We got the happy little splash screen there with all the different colors. Now we're hoping to see like a cursor. Yep, we're seeing the cursor up there. That is encouraging. And then we saw a few splash screens again. And what we're hoping is very shortly to see the desktop pop up. Now, sometimes the first time you boot, boom, look at that. Okay, sometimes the first time you boot, it can take a little longer, or it seems like sometimes it tries to figure things out. But you can see that for me, it went relatively fast. All right, so now I think probably I'd better get further out of your way, because it seems like I think maybe I can just move this. Let's see. Okay. Now also I have a mouse and a keyboard, and because I don't like a whole lot of cables, I am using this little USB dongle here and going to a wireless mouse and a wireless keyboard, and that way I don't have to manage a bunch of cables here. And also you've got kind of just 4 USB cables or 4 USB ports, and so by using this I get both mouse and keyboard with just using up one of the USB ports. Okay, now we're going to get this thing configured. So this says, welcome to the Raspberry Pi desktop. Before you start, there are a few things you need to set up. Go ahead and press next to get started. Okay, I am going to set mine up for the United States, even though I am not in the United States. I set it up as that because that's what kind of keyboard and all that. So I'll just say United States. I want American English, and then time zone ADAC. Well, you guys set your time zone. Mine isn't on here. I'll worry about fixing that later, but I do want US English language, and I want US keyboard. And if you're not in like the US, like if you're in UK, you might think about not clicking that. All right. And so that all looks good. We're going to click next, and then we're going to have a sip of coffee as this sits and waits. Setting location. All right. even though it's the wrong location. I'll fix all that later, and basically that just makes sure your clock is right. Okay, it's asking me for a password. Guys, you do need to have a password on your Raspberry Pi, because if it's hooked to your home network and you leave it unsecured, you're kind of leaving a door open for someone to get onto your system, and then once they're on your system, they can do various nefarious things. So you really do want to have a good password on anything you hook to the network. Hopefully you can't see what I'm typing in. Whoa. Okay, so let's see if that looks good. Okay. Now, this is what you can see is if you look up here between the screen and the purple, you can see that there is black around it. And so my desktop is not filling up my screen, and it's asking me, yes, I need to click yes. The screen shows a black border around the desktop, and this should fix it by doing this. And so when we look later, it's probably going to make us reboot, but when it comes back, we should not have that black border. So let's go ahead and click next. Okay, and select your Wi-Fi network from the list. Hopefully it will find it. Okay, I am Manor House 1. You will be something else. And now I need to put in hopefully I got that right. Okay, it looks like it's going to be pretty happy. These things usually go pretty fast. Okay. Now, update software. Yes, you want to update your software. In a future lesson, I'm going to show you how to do it later. Okay, but right now I'm going to skip it because it can take some time, and so I don't want to sit here waiting to update. You can either update it now if you want to pause and wait, or you can come in and do it later, but we're going to go ahead and skip that for right now. And then it says your Raspberry Pi is now set up and ready to go, and to press restart to restart with the new settings. So we're going to go ahead and do restart because we really hope this black border goes away by rebooting. Okay, so we're going to click that. And now we are going to wait, and we see the cursor, and hopefully we'll see the splash screen here in a second. Boom, the pretty colored splash screen. And now we should shortly see the desktop. And hopefully that black line is going to be gone this time. Boom, got the desktop, and look at that, Shazam, that black border is gone, so we are all good. Now, I love the Raspberry Pi. I hate the desktop configuration that they put on the Pi. And one of the things I particularly hate about it, is it's very low contrast, and it's very confusing, and it's kind of kludgy. So I want to take a few minutes and show you how I configure my desktop. Now, that doesn't mean you have to configure it exactly the way I do, but it's going to be a quick tour around some of the most important settings. And this is one of those things I found very confusing in trying to learn the Pi. There's not like a really good systematic way to go through it. So let's go through it and let's get this thing configured better. So I want you to come up to the happy little Raspberry Pi icon in the upper right, and I want you to click on it. And then I want you to come down to Preferences, and I want you to come over from Preferences. There it is. Come over from Preferences, and I want you to say Main Menu Editor. Now, why do we stop here? Because there's a lot of preferences that you can set, but they're hidden. So the first thing we want to do is add all of the preferences that we might want to use into our menu. So we're going to edit the main menu. Okay, now this comes up, and you can see that this is sort of a picture of what pops up when you click the happy little Raspberry Pi icon. Now, what I want you to come down is one of the things that pops up is Preferences, and then these are the things that come up under Preferences. And you see there is a lot of them, but they're not all showing. They're not all selected. Now, what we really want to select is we have Appearance, that's good. Add, Remove, that's good. We really want Display Settings to show. Okay, and then when we come down here to the bottom, we really want Theme and Appearance Settings, because that'll allow us to try to boost the contrast and get the screen a little bit more readable. And I think those are the main two that we want to add. And so then we will come over here and we will click OK. And now we should have the full featured menus of preferences. Now we're going to come up here, and now we're actually going to go through the preferences, and we don't need to add or remove software, but we do want to adjust the appearance settings. Okay, we want to adjust the appearance settings. The first thing that I hate is this confusing background, because as I'm trying to teach you, or as I'm trying to see what's where, this lovely scene of this sunset is just confusion. So I want simplicity. And so here where it says temple, I'm going to click. I did that too quickly. Let me show you here where it says temple. I'm going to click on that, and these are the options. You can go through it, but it's a lot of like photographs that are very confusing. And so the simplest one to me is just this Raspberry Pi logo.png, and that will give us something very simple. So I'm going to say OK. And then you can see that's very goofy. So you need to come here where it says fill screen with image, and we're just going to say center image on screen, and boom. You see how that's just a lot cleaner, crisper desktop? I really like that. Now we're not going to play with these colors right here. We're not going to play with these colors. And then it's going to show the wastebasket, which you can see the wastebasket is showing, and then also mounted disks. So like if you added a disk like a USB drive, it would pop up on your desktop as well. So that is good. Now we're going to look at the menu bar. Now this is what's confusing. You see it's calling this thing up here the menu bar, but then in other places it doesn't call it the menu bar, it calls it the panel. And this is kind of like sometimes a characteristic of open source team group people working together on things. It's like these guys are calling it a panel and these guys are calling it a menu bar. But anyway, the menu bar I want on the bottom, and the reason I want it on the bottom is just on Windows, that's where it is. And so since I'm used to it being on the bottom, I want it on the bottom. And when I did that, you see, boom, it came down here to the bottom. So kind of like all my systems have it in the same place. You can put it where you would like it. Again, we're not going to set the colors here. We're going to set the colors when we work on a theme. But again, what you can see I don't like is, do you see this is like light gray text on dark gray background? That is not easy to read, folks. That is not easy to read. And so I don't like these low contrast settings. Okay, the system looks okay. And then on defaults, now this is the crazy thing. I want you guys to be able to read. And again, you see how you can't even read this trash here. I want you guys to be able to see this really good. And so I want to set the default for large screens, and that's going to make all the text a little bit bigger. But when I did that, it just undid all the things that I did before. And so it's kind of strange to get the bigger, little bit more high contrast text. It undid everything, but we'll fix it again. We'll come back over here and we will go from temple to Raspberry Pi logo and say open. We'll then make it fit image onto screen. We'll do that. That's good. And then we will come to the menu bar, which is really, the menu bar is really the panel. And we will take that, we'll put it on the bottom. And then there we are, kind of like where we want to be. So we have gone through our first set of preferences. If you don't like how I set it, you can set it to how you would like it. But now let's take a quick look at display settings. 1980 by 1080 and 60 Hertz. That looks good. So we will just save that. Configuration saved. All right. The next thing, we're going to come to preferences. We've done the display. Keyboard and mouse, there's really nothing I'm going to change there at this point. We've already done the main menu editor that we needed to do there, the things that we needed to do. And so we're going to come to Raspberry Pi configuration. We're going to see what it is all about here. Okay, you could change your password here. You can do different things with how you boot or how you log on. You can sort of do this the way that you would like to do it. But this is something, if you did that black screen thing like I did, and then if it still had the black screen, sometimes for some reason it doesn't fix it. Well, this is where you would fix it. You would want to make sure that you're not on enable. You would want to make sure that you're on disable. And if for some reason it didn't fix that, when you clicked that box when we started, this is where you would fix it. If this is disabled, you will get rid of that black screen, that black border. Okay, this, like later on, when we're going to want to turn the camera on, we would want to enable it. If we want to remotely putty into our Pi, we would enable SSH here. If we want to have a remote desktop, we would start doing VNC. If we're connecting by SPI or I2C, which we will in later lessons, we would want to enable them here. We would have to enable the serial port if we wanted to do something like communicate with an Arduino. But you can see, I think these are basically security settings, and so when it boots, everything's turned off. And then if you want to turn things on, you've got to deliberately turn them on here. Raspberry Pi configuration and interfaces. Performance, I am not really into overclocking things, and so these things are probably pretty good here. And then localization, I could set my time zone here, but I won't take the time to do that right now. So we're just going to click OK. Now we're going to come down here, and under Preferences, we've done Raspberry Pi configuration. We've got recommended software. We should be OK there. And now screen configuration. Now what you can see is I have one screen. I have one screen showing here because I have one HDMI cable plugged in. If I plug my second monitor in, then it would have both of them showing. And then what you can do is you can move them around. Like if you had HDMI 2 on top, you could put it on top or left and right. And what that basically does is it gets your mouse working right and your cursor working right as you're moving from screen to screen. But right now, I'm just going to be using one screen. In later lessons, I'm going to call up that second screen. But for right now, we are using one screen. So our screen looks good. And now we're going to come over, and on Preferences, I think we are all the way down to Theme and Appearance. And this is where I'm going to try to get more contrast. Okay, you can see that the theme that is default is Pix Flat. And what I hate about it is I hate this like light gray on a dark gray background. I don't think that is readable. I don't think that is enough contrast. And so what I like to do is I like to start by going to mist. And to me, the mist seems to be a little bit more contrast. And then we'll do some other things to get even more contrast. The problem is if I come to high contrast, it's like black and white. Is there an in between, something that is readable, but not this ghoulish black and white thing? But yeah, the mist is the place that I would like to be. You guys, you can download themes from the internet that have got some really, really nice desktop color combinations, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. I can get it working well enough just with what's there. So we're going to go to Mist, and then on color, I am not going to customize any of the colors here. Okay, I'm just going to leave them with the theme colors. On the icon theme, I really like the GNOME ones because that's a little bit more like a lot of the Linux systems, and so I'm going to use the GNOME. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply those. All right, and then what you can see down here, I've got the new ones down here. All right, those are the GNOME ones. And then I'm going to go to mouse cursor. Those are, I can either have those or those. I think these are fine. The window border, I think, is important because this is where I'm going to try to get a little more contrast. And if you come down to these nightmare ones, okay, do you see how those are getting more contrast? And I actually like the nightmare one, which will give my active window sort of bright white over sort of a deep plum. And I think that is both attractive and very readable. Okay, I think that is attractive and very readable. So we are going to go with that. You see, you could install a new theme here. You can download them and you can install them. But like I say, we're just going to go with the themes that we have here. And now we are going to go to font, and on the font, nothing really here, and then other, nothing really anything here that we need to do either, I think. And so we can close at this point, and that is looking kind of strange. Let me go back. Something funny happened somewhere along the way. Preferences. Let's go to where was that? Appearance and settings. Okay. Fit image onto screen. I think that was wrong. What I want to do is center it on the screen like that. There it is. Okay. So that was appearance and settings. And now I think I have a nice clean desktop that I really like. Now let me see. Okay, one more thing that we want to do. I hate 2-click machines, right? Why overwork yourself with 2 clicks where you can do it with 1 click? So we're going to come down here to the little icon of the file cabinet. That's your file manager, and you pop up sort of a, what would be a very familiar view of a folder view of your system. And then we're going to come up to edit, and we're going to go to preferences, and up here at the top, open files with a single click, and then I am going to say close, and then that makes me very happy. Okay, that makes me very happy. I've got a clean desktop, I've got a readable font, and the font sizes are large enough that I can read them and you guys can read them. Okay, now let me try to kind of help you with one last thing in this lesson, and that is something that I found that was probably the most confusing thing to get figured out was this little panel bar down here. And again, it calls it the menu bar in one place, and then in other places it calls it the panel. And if you get this thing goofed up, it's very hard to get it right. So I want to kind of take you through it and explain it, and explain where you can understand the terminology. Usually this whole thing all the way across, and I need to go to a different view here. I think I need to go to a different view where you can see the whole desktop. So say goodbye to the live shot of the Raspberry Pi, and then we're going to go to this shot, and then I need to edit this very briefly. I'm sorry I didn't have my windows already, but I need to make sure that you can see the whole desktop. Okay, I think that will work. Okay, there. Now you can see the whole desktop, and I will probably have to get further out of your way before this is over. But okay, this whole area down here is the panel. If I right mouse click on it, you can see that it talks about the taskbar, it talks about the panel, and it talks about panel settings. So there's panels and taskbars, and there's also applets, and there's also the menu. So the whole thing is the panel. From the left to the right down there, that is the panel. Now this little icon here, this is the menu. And when you click on it, you get all of your menu items. Okay, all of your menu items. And if we wanted to edit that, we would go to preferences, and then we would edit the menu. Okay, and then you can see here are what we have. This is what we have. This is what's available to us. Like if we turned off universal access, then over here you can see that universal access is grayed out. It's not going to be on the menu. Let's just look at that. We'll come over here, and sure enough, universal access has disappeared. So that is how that works. But again, like I showed you earlier, the other part of this that you need to understand is if we come into preferences and we go into menu, you also can change or edit the submenus that are in the folder. So to do that, I would come over here, and like preferences is a group of items, and then everything in preferences shows up here, and then I can turn those on or I can turn those off. And so that is kind of what you need to know. This is the panel, this is the menu. Well, then what is this? This is the launcher. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually come in and kind of show you. I think I need to edit this just a little bit more to make sure that it is absolutely readable for you. Okay, and I'll kind of move it over here. Okay, and now I will bring you to that view. Okay, I think you'll be able to see it now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to play around with the panel. Now, what's the taskbar? Okay, so taskbar settings. What is the taskbar? Okay, this sort of controls what the taskbar looks like, and the taskbar is this area here that is going to show the things that are actually running. Since we don't have anything running, nothing shows here, but let's say that I just clicked I clicked on the file cabinet, and then you can see in the taskbar we have this icon show up. Now what's confusing to me, and we'll fix this in a minute, if this is the launcher is kind of right up against the taskbar, so when you look at it, it's hard to say what's part of the taskbar and what is part of the launcher. So I don't like that very much. But what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we are going to right mouse click on the panel, and we are going to say Panel Settings. Okay, Panel Settings. And the first thing is the geometry. Okay, you can have it on the bottom, you can have it on the top, you can have it on the left or the right. Well, it started out on the top and we moved it to the bottom, and so we are going to leave it there. Now let me show you one of the goofy things that I don't know if they'll fix this at some point. Let's move it back to the top and then say close. What happened when it moved it to the top? It changed the icon. Why did it do that? That's annoying. So let's come back and say Panel Settings again, and let's move it back to the bottom, and look at that, it is still that one. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to come into Menu Settings. Okay, so let me do that very carefully. I right mouse click on the icon, Menu Settings, and where it says Start here, I go back to RPI. Maybe you like that little squiggling thing, but I like the little happy raspberry. Isn't that goofy? Maybe by the time you take this class, maybe the version that you download, they would have fixed this little glitch. But that is that. Now let's come over, let's go back to Panel Settings, okay? And so this is all more or less right. You know, you could adjust things if you want. If you want to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, you could make the height bigger and the icon smaller, whatever you want. You could kind of adjust that if you wanted to. But now let's come to appearance. I like to use the system theme. If I want to change this, I want to change it in the theme, not in the individual element. Now this is where your real action happens, and that is your panel applets. And this is very, very confusing, but if you look at it, this shows what you have as you come across. What is the first thing you have is the menu. That is the menu there. Okay, that is the menu. What is the next thing? It is a spacer. Okay, it is a spacer. So this little globe, which is your web browser, and this are not absolutely against each other. There's a very small spacer between them. Now, what is this stretch business? Well, if I turn on stretch, it moves it out away and sort of makes it stretched out between the, and I'm really going to have to get out of your way here so that you can see this, and then I'll come back in a minute. Little munchkin me. Okay, so what that does is that stretches, I make that spacer where it stretches, and it puts a stretch between this group of icons and this group of icons. Okay, and so that sort of stretches it out, but we'll turn that off. What did I do? We'll turn off the stretch on the spacer. Now, what is the next thing? The next thing is the application launch bar. And these things are things that you have an icon that allow you with one click to open a program. So you don't have to go to the menu. You can just open them with one click. So what do we have for one click? Well, the browser, the file system, and the terminal. Now, what I don't like is, you see, like my panel preferences, that is not, my panel preferences is not part of the application launch bar. It is part of the taskbar. It is part of the taskbar. Okay, and so it's very easy to get confused about what is the application launch bar and what is the taskbar. So what I like to do is I like to put a stretch on this spacer here, and then that taskbar is over away from the launch bar. And so now if I start a few things up, what you can see is it's very clear. These are the ones that are open, and these are my choice of things that I could open. Okay, let's say there's some things I really want here that I want just easy access and quick click to access them. And so here on my application launch bar, right, my application launch bar, I want to add. And what do I want to add? Let's look here and see if there is anything that is really good. I'm trying to see if there's something. Okay, I don't see anything that I really have to have. I was hoping there would be something cool there that wasn't there, but I don't really see anything. Let's look at preferences on that launch bar and see if we're given any more things. Maybe we are given more things here. So instead of adding is just adding kind of system things. If we click on application launch bar and we go to preferences, then I cannot stand being that munchkin. There, that's not quite as embarrassing. Okay, so what we have done is we've gone to panel preferences, we've clicked on application launch bar, and now under preferences, what I can add is I can add a program. So if I look at programming, I could come down here and I could select Hdmi Python. Okay, and then I can over here add that and then close. And then what do I have? I have an icon in the application launch bar that I can click on, and then with a little luck, boom, I come up and I've got kind of a Python environment that I can work on. And so that shows you how you can put your most used programs here and you can get them with one click. And so that is pretty good. So again, we are on panel applets here. And then I think that looks good. Then we are going to go to advanced, and there's nothing really that we need to do there. And this all looks good. And so I am going to come back now to panel applets, because now we sort of deep dove into the application launch bar, but now we are going to continue going across. So after the application launch bar, there is a spacer. We have told the spacer to stretch, and therefore, since the spacer is stretched, this panel preference, which is the taskbar, is not against here. If we took that stretch out, it comes back, and I don't like that. Are you seeing down at the bottom what happened? I don't like that. Okay, now, similarly, the taskbar, and I'm going to have to go back to Munchkin size. Okay, now watch this. What, you guys tell me, what is going to happen if I take the spacer off the taskbar, right? This is the taskbar. I'm going to take the spacer off, and then all of a sudden it goes all the way over to kind of like these system things on the right. Well, I don't want that either, so I'm going to stretch it. I could probably either stretch it there, or I could stretch it. Yeah, you could either stretch the spacer, or you could stretch the taskbar. I think I'm going to stretch the spacer like that. I think that looks good. Okay, guys, I don't know what the system tray is. I can't figure it out. There's nothing showing here. Maybe the system tray is something that only shows like if you have a system warning or something come up. I look everywhere. I don't know what the system tray is. There's no settings. I can only add it or remove it. I can't change any settings. So I have no idea what that system tray is. Now we come up, the next thing is the ejector, and the ejector would really be over here to the right, but the reason you don't see it is I don't have anything plugged in to eject, and so it doesn't show up. Then there is a spacer, and then comes the Bluetooth, which you can see here, and then spacer, and then the wireless and wired network, which you can see, okay, and then the sound, and then finally the clock. Okay, so you now see how you can get the icons that you want down here, and that you understand that sometimes this is called the menu, but it is really the panel. And then what you see is the menu is this thing that pops up like this. Then you have the application launch bar. Okay, then over here you have the taskbar, and then you have a stretch, and then you just have individual icons over here that are kind of like nice system things. Okay, man, I almost went insane because like I would lose this thing. Like let me show you something here. I don't know. Let's say, okay, let me show you how this can be confusing in case you ever run into this. You've seen it before. So I am going to go to back to panel settings. Okay, and let's just say that we came in here, and on our panel applets, I accidentally removed the menu. Okay, the menu is gone. Now, it might be you accidentally remove it, and you might say, well, I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to accidentally remove it. Sometimes it disappears on its own, and so therefore we would get it back how? We would right mouse click, and then we would come up to Panel Settings, and then we would go to the Panel Applets. That's like the individual little applications represented by an icon. And what do I want to do? I'm going to want to add something, and what am I going to want to add? I'm going to want to add the menu back, okay, the menu back. And so I am going to add it, okay, and now I am going to look, and I don't see it anywhere. Somebody tell me why I don't see it. I see it here, but I don't see it on the panel itself. Well, you might say because it's all the way to the right, and maybe somehow it has gotten off the right side of the screen. So let's select it and let's move it up. Okay, so we're going to move it all the way up. Okay, and now move it up, 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 up. And moving it up is really moving it left. Okay, and now let's say close, and it's still not there. It's still not there. So if you come way over here, like way, way, way to the left, and you click, it's there, but you got to come all the way to the left. It's there, but it doesn't have an icon. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, we go back to Preferences, and let's see, where would that be? We're going to go back to the main menu editor, and it is not a choice there. It is... let's look at Menu Settings. Okay, Menu Settings, and then it has a path for some reason here to a icon it can't find. Well, how do we get the icon back? RPI, like we did earlier. All right, and then boom, there it is. Guys, just as I'm using the Raspberry Pi, I can't tell you how frustrating it is when your little start icon disappears and then you can't find it and you have absolutely no way to know where it is or how to get it back. The reason I did this is so when it happens to you, and it will happen to you, you'll know how to get your icon back. And a lot of times it's really there. The start menu is really there, but you just can't see it. Okay, guys, man, I hope you guys are having as much fun with this as I am. This is going to be a great series of lessons. We are going to have a lot of fun. Okay, get your hardware ordered. Do the best you can to find your Raspberry Pi. I've given you the link for the Sunfounder kit. And then what we're going to do is, again, next week, we are going to be looking at Linux. Then we're going to be looking at Python. And then we're going to start playing with the GPIO pins. Okay, so you guys need to be getting all of your hardware together now so that when we get to these lessons, you will have it. Okay, I need to give you guys a homework assignment. And what I want you to do for your homework is I want you to just go in and kind of get familiar with some of the software and some of the things that are on the Raspberry Pi. So sort of play around with this start menu. You can see there's some programming environments that you can play with. There's some education software. This is like a circuit simulator. Play around with these Office applications. This is a lot like Microsoft Office. And so you've got things that are like very, very similar to Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word. And if you're familiar with those programs, you'll find that these things are very, very similar. And you should be comfortable with those. You can see that we've got the Chrome browser. We've got an image viewer. We've got some neat things in here. So your homework for next week is to just go in and familiarize yourself with the Pi desktop. Okay, so that is going to be your homework. All right, guys, I am so excited about this series of lessons. I've got some really exciting stuff planned. And again, what this series of lessons is about is for you to learn, not just for you to copy what I'm doing. And so we're going to have a lot of homework. We're going to be using math. We're going to be using, me teaching you how to think like an engineer and think like a coder. And so this is really, really going to be a class where you learn a lot and you have a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this lesson, make sure to give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, when you subscribe to the channel, make sure that you ring that bell so that you get notifications of upcoming homework, of upcoming lessons. Oh, one more homework assignment. Almost forgot this. Leave a comment down below what you would like to see in this series of lessons, okay? Because I am just now starting to build the lessons, so now would be the time for you to let me know what you hope that I cover. A lot of times, like there's a lesson that I made 3 years ago, or a class or a series of lessons that I made 3 years ago, and then someone will leave a comment, oh, well, you should do this. Well, it's too late. I already finished the lesson. So now is the time for you to leave a comment about what you hope that I cover in this series of classes. Okay, guys, hope you're having fun with this. I really look forward to next week having you guys tune in again. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.